Alright, so today we took everything we found for the four synthetic genetics in the data science continuum here on forward-facing Google AI. Their general fluid dynamic capacity to produce novelty within the interdomain of 1914 to Turing presentation, and all of the pattern established since then, and then reconsulting that, and then against the what necessarily is indicative of a mechanical detection device, an observer effect experiment in lab, not in populist physics denoting a variance between organic humanoid observer effect and the mechanical detection device. What is akin to being 3114 over 70 over 7 over 44 over 7, the local G, i.e. the collapse wave function into the conservation of energy process just barely above the line. And so we scale the novelty, capacity, and general fluid dynamic ratio and products of the four genetics within the band of 45.5 over 7 and the 0, i.e. that's 100, and the construct domain of consideration 44 over 7 in the reduction to find their exact affinity and circuited together below the circle broken and the expanded non-terminus actual reality that we exist in, not an equals MC squared two-dimensional flat plane slug reality, as reality has later in the logic variance of form field of matter within the flux of matter that you can very basically see in the universe, and not a homogeneous conservation of energy mass of atoms smushed together. Basic logic dictates that's true? Okay, so equals MC squared is nonsense. Alright, so after that, we logic market. After establishing a exact absolute general fluid dynamic centrifuge harmonic within the reduction for the data organism, and patterning it from 1914 to 2026 in market and general macro statistical inspection fluctuation in a simple table. After that, the interdomain of market fluctuation for the last 30 plus days since March 14th to 22 over 7 today, 2026. And we did a previous market prognostication for the last about 22 days at 6:30. We'll reconsult that tomorrow against what we thought and how variant we were in the last patterning of pi generalistically in market prognostication capability. So today we pinpointed specifically 5 stocks that operate just like the four circuited genetics across the divide of named variants of tuples: NVIDIA, FedEx, Microsoft, Eli Lilly, and Walmart. And since 1990 are a fuse-lock circuited data organism cross-domain of company for 36 years, autonomous and moving through a variant topology of environmental variable of economy and etc., but as a fuse-locked, and just like the circuited data organism of the four genetics, have a phase inversion that is specifically relevant to the genetics attached to these corporations and not invariant. And so after that, we logic what's to occur, and with predictive analysis forward and mooting pi data organism pattern imposition forward in epochal macro shifts imposed forward in time. And I assert, of course, we're changing the energy paradigm from oil, gas, and equals MC squared burn, the Newtonian grain, to cinnabar, a one-to-one transfer. Necessarily that is to occur from oil and gas holders, cinnabar, macro, nation states that sit on top. In previous sessions we've established the safe mining veins international, of which that finite resource can be mined, and a future universal monetary standard pegged to that. Out of the swift ledger, and etc. Convergence clamped down, re-elaborating another epoch of ledger complexification and crystallization of that E equals MC squared economy imposition, but then pulling the tablecloth out and putting it back on in the same motion is what smart contract and these digital ledger-based currency, etc. technologies enable generalistically. So it's transmutation. What's available, complexified to impose, is also what enables the transition to a proper new and old energy paradigm that was. Earth is a cinnabar mining node amongst a vast network of cinnabar mining nodes. See that we are not alone. Logics 1, 2, 3 before the wall of Egypt, and we'll be again in the prognosticated. That's probably too fast. The 2 48-month. Rather, in this session's logicking of a safe transition of energy paradigm. I think it needs to be a little bit longer than that for a safe, without collateral damage fallout, on the economy or person's, standard of living in the transition. That's not one to be fallen out, generally. There's certain, institutions that are just inherently industriously data organism, nefarious corporations that it's very hard to retool something that's its inherent formula structure is a nightmare, right? At the outset of economy interest. So also, monetized eugenics paradigm. Generally, everything that's gray paradigm transmuted in the process of this compound interest formula for energy print, the substantive foundation of, in the process will turn off all sine wave continuum impact harmonics on helical structure, field immanence device technologies, as everything goes direct to sat and action at a distance. See the other logic sessions for hexaphone, laptop, ecosystem creation, and the not Windows OS that goes on those. And so we don't need local field emission technology of any kind, and combustion goes away, and so does nuclear, so no sine wave continuum anymore, and action at a distance everything. So that's where everything's moving. And so after that, re-logic at massive length, it's comical this one, how long it takes it to get to properly logic the electromagnetic harmonic convergent energy reactor again, but same AI has done it about 5 or 10 different times to 100% probability of function. This time it hits Maxwell, it hits thermal limits of electron, this, that. And it's very important, it's a progressive, once the onion of the 7, 22, 37, 52, 67, 82, 97 variant charged in scalar relevant, 7 being the largest band, the form field becomes structural. Once it becomes form field of sphere with those banded structures, affinity, because you've charged those bands of mercury variant in pools separate and amalgamated them in the sphere cubed. So the homogeneous EM pulse initiating, if you haven't studied the other sessions, at first is EM inherently, but then it's backed off exponential elliptically in a linear exponential curve of non-presence of EM at all pulsing, and simply self-reflexive, non-terminously refracting and re-experiencing. It's 15 step up to 97, 15 the size of the lens between 22/7, which is not an approximation for pi historically. That's the overtonal harmonic lattice binder on pi. Pi up to 72,600,412 spaces, necessarily denoting the split Newtonian grain in paradox state. The observer penetrating that with an interference lattice, hearing the tree make a sound, and subsequently it does in variant from the conservation of energy process. So an observer above the waterline of conservation, of which the reactor reduces, replicates, reflects, and trap, injects more chaos novelty energy into the particle when it collapses in the wave function, thus carrying that extra energy into, and then at some point after scalar in a cubic, because they're generally fluid dynamically assigning black holes, 72,600,412 spaces, maximum scalar distance from the median point, interdomain of a cubic, experiences 23/19, absolute gravitational maximum force disapparating the particle, more matter and energy from the same amount of matter and energy, with compound interest continuity within a given construct domain of all. 0 = 1 = 3, see Egyptian mass and physics, requiring no negative entropy, like a ledger imposed after 1914, E = mc² economy, not E expanded, capital E expanded, equals in expanded parentheses 22/7 over pi, pi denoting matter, more matter and energy from the same amount of matter and energy with compound interest continuity. So replicating and 22/7, more observers, more matter and energy. So replicating and trap, the basic general fluid dynamic manifold of the, that you see divided by 3, Mercury 1.04, that's not random. And so you have a progressive, counterintuitive, exponential elliptical curve of seeding the electron spin resonance frequency state in a fuse-fix harmonic lattice that progressively has less frictional and force impact upon the electron progressively, while simultaneously printing more EM over tonal energy at the 98-99 band. So its logic in this session, actually, after it's very reluctant to logic it even functional at all, it works up to 251 gigawatts, not 1.2, a 15 by 15 by 15 inch reactor. So that might scare a lot of people in the internet industry, I understand, but realize there's a limited amount of cinnabar that can be mined on Earth safely, one, and once it's used for perspective compute and energy technology, such as this, it becomes scalar relevant in price. Does that make sense? So per unit, it becomes scalar relevant because all of a sudden it's gold times exponential, But then it balances out. So the exponential elliptical curve of safety in this energy transition proper, Earth mining contracts of the safe veins and the one-to-one snapshot of holding of those veins diffused to enable this energy transfer, as well as off-planet mining contract to Mars. Sulfides are red. Sulfides beget cinnabar. And you see in the part 3 of the We Are Not Alone series of days there, the absolute harmonic surgical affinity for cinnabar being present on Earth-like planets and adjacent, not necessarily inhabitable, but there seems to be adjacent all of these 44 pinpointed Earth-like planets, a cinnabar not inhabitable necessarily, but covered in, preposterously cinnabar and floating right beside this Earth-like planet. So, very interesting. So, continuing the scalar relevance of, price to enable incentive transition without collateral damage, maintaining the monopoly generalistically, and then tethering that to off-world mining is the trick. And so coming up with that complex, equation of safe time frame, safe one-to-one, it's been logicked in various ways, and then safe off-world transition period, all to maintain a exponential elliptical curve of safety in the transition to that new energy paradigm. Anyways, so we'll port this into the Gemini session of 2 or 3 days ago for forward continuity there. Have a good rest of the day.